Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're completely skipping the usual run-of-the-mill news feed because we really need to uncover the tectonic shifts happening right now across the entire technology landscape. Look, if you've been following the industry, you already know we're in a completely unprecedented era. But what is happening this August of 2026? It's something entirely different. This is the exact moment where astronomical hype is violently colliding with hard, on-the-ground reality. We're going to break down everything today, from massive leaps in hardware to some incredible friction in human talent, the literal weaponization of AI, and this radical new rulebook the world is suddenly deploying to rein it all in. Okay, let's dive into this. 15 million euros. It is a staggering number, and honestly, it represents a massive wake-up call for the tech sector this month. This single figure perfectly encapsulates the tension we're seeing across the board right now. We're talking about enormous EU AI Act fines for non-compliance, massive publishers losing upwards of 38% of their traffic to AI summaries, and these unprecedented hardware leaps that are desperately trying to keep pace with all this computing demand. This is exactly what happens when unchecked, breakneck innovation finally slams into the boundaries of global law and human economics. All right, so let's start with phase one, the push for power. To really grasp how we got to this point of intense friction, we first have to look at the relentless speed of hardware and commercial AI innovation happening this very month. The tech giants are absolutely not slowing down. For years, if you used a Google Pixel, you were probably well aware of the thermal throttling complaints that plagued the older Tensor generations. They just ran hot. But with the Made by Google 2026 event in New York, unveiling the new Pixel 11, the 11 Pro, the 11 Pro Fold, starting at $1,899, and even that surprise Pixel tag accessory, Google is literally attacking this at the microscopic level. The new Pixel 11 Tensor G6 is Google's first 2-nanometer chip, and it's built on TSMC's gate-all-around process. Basically, that's a brand new transistor architecture designed specifically for localized, on-device AI processing without literally melting your pocket. They're actually beating Apple's anticipated A20 chip to the market on this specific node, which is huge. But hey, it's not just phones. We are witnessing an absolute land grab in enterprise AI right now. The crucial point here is that these companies are in a dead sprint to control the future of work. OpenAI just launched ChatGPT Work, powered by GPT 5.6, taking direct aim at Anthropic's Claude and Google's Gemini. They're moving away from those simple chat interfaces toward agent-first automation, really trying to capture those massive corporate budgets. Meanwhile, IBM, they're making a $240 million wager on open-source AI inference, which is the actual running of these models, by teaming up with Together AI. They're deploying NVIDIA Blackwell systems on IBM Cloud to challenge the big tech hyperscalers. Their bet is that enterprise buyers are eventually going to care way more about cost per token than the prestige of the model itself. And perhaps most astonishingly, Google's DeepMind took its AMI medical research system way beyond text this month. They've successfully demonstrated it in real-time, live clinical video consultations. The AI is literally sitting in the doctor's office with you now. Moving right along to phase two, human and copyright friction. You simply cannot build at this blistering pace without causing some massive friction behind the scenes. We're seeing this stunning contrast over at Google DeepMind right now. On one hand, you have their historical dominance at the frontier of AI, but simultaneously, they are bleeding top-tier talent in what looks like an existential crisis. Demis Hassabis is stepping back into a chair role, and Korey Kavuk-Oglu is stepping up to report directly to Sundar Pichai. But the real shockwave here is the departure of Jeff Dean, a 27-year Google veteran, along with heavyweights like Sanjay Gemawat, Oriol Vinyals, Kwok Lei, and John Jumper. They are all leaving to launch a startup called Discovery Loop AI, which is focused on automating scientific discovery. Look, when the very architects of your empire leave in a mass exodus to build their own, it raises a very serious question about whether Google can rebuild its research leadership fast enough to defend its eroding frontier position. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that 38% figure. That is the sheer scale of the traffic loss. Publishers are claiming they're suffering because AI overviews are answering search queries directly. French newspapers have officially filed a complaint against Google, flat out blaming these AI summaries for decimating their ad revenue models. Because think about it, if the AI reads the news for you and summarizes it right there on the search page, you're never clicking the link. You never see the ads. It's a direct existential threat to the economic model that has funded the press for 2 decades. Which brings us to phase 3, the dark side of innovation. And this brings us to a much darker reality. These rapid computing advancements aren't just causing corporate friction, they are actively being weaponized. So I really want to pose this question directly to you because this isn't some science fiction movie anymore. Are we actually prepared for AI in our elections? When synthetic media is completely indistinguishable from reality, how does a democracy even function? We talk about this abstractly all the time, but the abstract threat has completely materialized. Take Operation Matryoshka, which was disclosed just this month. This is a state-sponsored campaign coming out of Russia that is actively deploying AI-generated deepfake videos to spread disinformation right ahead of Germany's federal vote. This proves, without a doubt, that AI-generated video is no longer a warning about the future. It is an active, currently deployed tool in election interference today. At the exact same time, enterprise networks are just under absolute siege. The August threat landscape has been overwhelming for security teams. Microsoft alone dumped 421 individual security vulnerabilities, CVEs, that needed fixing. Within that massive pile, there's an actively exploited zero-day in the WinSock driver, which Tenable is attributing directly to the Lazarus group. We're also seeing Rapid7 complete an unauthenticated remote code execution chain for SharePoint. That allows attackers to compromise servers remotely from anywhere in the world, no credentials needed. Oh, and a public proof of concept called ShieldBreak was released, claiming to bypass Microsoft Defender entirely. Combine all of this with Intel disclosing multiple high-severity flaws that allow privilege escalation, and you have a perfect storm of vulnerabilities that is literally keeping enterprise defenders awake at night. But, it's so vital to remember that cyber threats don't just stay trapped in the digital realm. They hit our daily lives. Take the CEVA logistics breach. Threat actors hit 8 of their European warehouses, completely disrupting contract logistics. Think about the brands cascading down from the single point of failure. Steam, Bol, the Bijenkorf, Ajax, ING Bank. A digital intrusion on a shared logistics vendor suddenly means physical shipments are delayed, supply chains are frozen, and real-world commerce just grinds to a halt. We also saw Uber Freight confirming an investigation into hacker claims this month and a supply chain compromising hitting the WordPress plugin vendor Blue Themes. Everything is connected. All right, wrapping things up with Phase 4, the new rulebook. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how we're trying to counter these threats. The EU AI Act's high-risk provisions are now fully enforceable as of August 2nd. One of the major compliance baselines is invisible AI watermarking, specifically using the C2PA open standard. Basically, these are imperceptible, machine-readable tags embedded directly into AI-generated text and media. And it's sticky. It persists through copy and paste. If a chatbot makes it, it absolutely has to be marked. This is exactly how regulators are trying to create a verifiable trail of truth on the internet to combat things like deepfakes. It's honestly fascinating to watch how this builds a completely new dynamic between regional laws and global engineering. The EU is threatening massive fines. Remember that staggering 15 million euro number we talked about at the start of the explainer? But what's truly interesting is how the big companies are reacting to it. Anthropic, for example, is rolling out these invisible watermarks on all text generated by their Claude models. But they aren't just doing it for European users to comply. They're applying this compliance baseline globally. European law is literally becoming a universal engineering requirement for every major lab on the planet. Meanwhile, the US is fortifying its own stance, confirming Cassidy as its first dedicated cyber ambassador in years to help coordinate international responses to these state-sponsored attacks and ransomware campaigns. So that leaves us with this final, really critical thought to wrap up our explainer today. As AI agents like ChatGPT begin to literally run our workplaces and sophisticated deepfakes target our democratic elections, will global regulations like the EU AI Act actually be enough to keep the future in check? We are watching a real-time tug-of-war between incredible technological maturity and severe societal friction. The rulebook is finally written, but whether it can actually hold back the tide of innovation and exploitation is something we're going to be tracking very, very closely. Thank you so much for walking through this August 2026 data with me. Keep your eyes on the horizon, and I'll see you in the next explainer.